We're going to call this special meeting of the school board to order. If you would all please rise for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Dietrich and a second by Ms. Steffenthaler. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Let the record reflect that we have all board members present here in the boardroom. Okay, so our first item is item 2.01, review the interview schedule. Mr. Reichert.
How's everyone?
Good, thank you. You?
Very good, thank you.
He said,
Can everyone hear me okay?
now we can.
Okay, very good. In your packet, I think that Ms. Falls has provided 4 sample schedules that are becoming clearer as we move through the process. In your packet, there should be a schedule should we have 3 finalists, 4 finalists, 5 finalists, and also a schedule for 6 finalists, should that be the direction the board goes in. I will say that there are a lot of general things that are identical on the schedules. One of the things that certainly will be more clear will be the host that will be identified for each of the finalists once the board determines how many finalists we will have. So that host to be determined will be filled in as we identify the number of finalists that the board will select. As we look at each of the schedules, you'll see that the out-of-area finalists will arrive on Tuesday, September the 15th. Ms. Falls has the reservations confirmed at the Hilton Home 2 on 1440 Northwest Federal Highway in Stewart. The schedule provides them with a phone number for contact. And again, after the board determines who the finalists will be, I will be in contact with them and make sure they're aware of these details related to the hotel. On that Tuesday, September 15th in the evening, the finalists will have dinner on their own, as that was the indication or the preference that the board had. As we move to Wednesday, September the 16th, depending on the schedules and the number of finalists we have, the finalists will arrive at 7:45 if we have 3 or 4 finalists. They'll arrive at 7:30 if we have 5 finalists, and they'll arrive at 7:15 if we have 6 finalists. In working with the board chair at Ms. Falls, I understand that the light continental style breakfast would be provided by the foundation on that Wednesday morning. Of course, all of these activities on that Wednesday will be at the school board meeting room there on Ocean Boulevard. The interviews and school community tours, if you have 3 or 4 finalists, will begin at 8:30. The board interview for 3 or 4 finalists will be an hour and a half. Should we have 5 finalists, the only difference is that we will begin at 8:15 with the board interview and community tours. If we have the 5 finalists, again, those interviews by the board will still be an hour and a half. Should the board elect to have 6 finalists, we will begin the board interviews and school community tours at, if there are 6, we'll start those at 8 o'clock. And the board interviews, if there are 6 finalists, will only be an hour and 15 minutes. So they are reduced by 15 minutes just to make the schedule work for 6 finalists. At the end of those board interviews and school community tours, we're working to have a light dinner there at the school board meeting room in some building at the Ocean Boulevard address around 5:30. And of course, depending on the schedule of the finalists for, say, candidate A, B, or C, there should be ample time for those folks to, be there for the 5:30 light dinner before we begin that 6 o'clock virtual Q&A that will be hosted by Ms. Messina, and she will interview those finalists. The schedule for those Q&A sessions are found in the bottom box on the Wednesday, September the 16th. The green room concept would simply be that candidate A would be, say, in the green room from 6 to 6:15, getting prepared, getting mic'd up, and then that interview for candidate A would begin at 6:20, and the interview will be for 15 minutes. And we will proceed through that process depending on the number of finalists as reflected on the schedule. I haven't yet filled in the blank for the public to access those Q&A sessions, so I will certainly get that access address so that we can publicize and have that out for the public to be able to view those interviews in some live stream format as determined by your IT department. On the Thursday, we move forward to Thursday. Again, the Thursday would be your one-on-one interviews with each candidate. Regardless of the number of finalists we have, your one-on-one interview will be for 1 hour. Those interviews will begin at, depending on the number of finalists, 3, 4, or 5. Your interviews could begin at 8:45 is pretty much the standard time until we move into 8:15 should we have 6 finalists. Those one-on-one interviews will be held at your new district office at 1939 Southeast Federal Highway, Stewart. And we did do a quick tour of that building, Dr. Vogel and I, with Diane Falls, and the rooms. She is working to identify the rooms that each board member will be in at your new district office to conduct your interviews. So we have a TBD with regard to the room numbers, which we will fill that in as well. Lunch on that Thursday, I understand will be hosted from what Ms. Falls told me about the Stewart Martin County Chamber of Commerce, and that will be just a light box lunch type meal, and that will be, depending on the schedule, somewhere around 12 or 12:30. And then we wrap up the afternoon with the last interviews. Schedule, they wrap up around 3:45 for 3, 4, or 5 finalists, and if we have 6, they would wrap up at 4:30. Are there any questions about the schedule? Again, I know we have a few things to fill in the blanks with to be determined. And we'll say, should the board elect to have 6 finalists, then there will be one of those 6 finalists who will have 1 hour. They will kind of be in a waiting room because, of course, 5 board members will be interviewing while the sixth candidate is in that kind of waiting room or green room. But we are prepared for that should we have 6. And again, the few missing pieces of our schedule will be filled in as soon as we identify our exact number of finalists. That is kind of my quick overview, and certainly I'll respond to any questions that the board might have.
Does the board have any questions about the interview schedules?
No, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to 2.02, which is the method and process for finalist selection. Andrea?
Yes, thank you, and glad to be with you today. We will follow a process that is somewhat similar to the process where you chose your semifinalists. In that, we will ask for discussion on each of the semifinalists in order, in numerical order. So we'll say finalist number 1, and what are the strengths that you see? Do you have any questions about that candidate that you may want them to address when they come in, if they get to come in, that sort of stuff. So we'll go through each of the candidates, focusing on their strengths, those things that each of you see as the reasons that that person has qualifications that have been met, that sort of thing. And then once all the conversation has concluded on each of the candidates, I will give each of you a tally sheet, and we will be kind of showing the tally sheet as well. And I'll ask you to identify those semifinalists that you would like to see be brought in for an interview. So if experience tells me anything, there may be 1 or 2 of the semifinalists that all 5 board members would like to bring in for an interview. And then there will be some finalists that maybe don't get all 5 of you to say that you want to bring them in, but maybe 4 or 3 of you would like to bring them in. So we'll have some conversation about that. Typically, if 3 or more board members want to bring someone in, because that's the majority if you were to take a vote, most boards just say, yeah, go ahead and pass those people through. And then there will be potentially a candidate or 2 who may get either 1 or 2 board members who would like to move them forward. And then we ask the board to kind of discuss those candidates to determine if you want to bring them in. At the end, our goal is that the board will have consensus on however many finalists you'd like to bring in, and that all board members can support bringing in those people that you would like to extend the invitation to come for an interview. Questions?
Any questions from the board? Okay, that sounds great, Andrea. Did you all have anything else that you wanted to share with us? You see we have an...
Yes, this is Bill.
Okay.
Andrea, we're planning on being on site also on September 2nd for that
Correct.
meeting, just for your information. And second, last meeting we talked about a board member suggested the possibility of a video that would be completed by the finalists and be posted. One concern that I heard was that the suggested time was 5 minutes, and I think that might be too long. I think we didn't decide exactly what question they would have, but I would like to point out that the videos and the questions that the semifinalists are answering are due back, I believe, tomorrow, and those will be posted. So my question is, do we still want to consider video for the actual finalist? And I am concerned about the length of time. So, Mr. Powers, maybe we could have additional discussion. And before we start that, Andrea, could you maybe comment on that also?
Yeah, you bet. And I was looking to make sure I was pulling up the document. The questions are not due until 5 p.m. on Wednesday, so not tomorrow. Today's only
Okay.
Monday, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Just making
okay.
sure. And so, the question is, and it was brought up at the last meeting, and the phrase that was used was sort of an elevator speech, and that at least one board member wanted to have either finalists or semifinalists submit an elevator speech. But I would also tell you that typically in the live board interview, which is the 5 board members sitting at the dais or wherever, and the candidate coming in for the public interview, typically the first thing you would do in that session would be to afford each of the finalists 5 minutes to really kind of have what we call an opening statement, which I think would be the equivalent of the quote-unquote elevator speech. But that doesn't mean that it has to be that way. So we really are looking to see whether you all want that in a video form before people come in for an interview, or if you want that to be the first sort of opening option for the face-to-face board interviews.
Ms. Roberts, you had a question?
So this is Lee Roberts, and yes, I'm the one who brought up the elevator speech, and I still think it's a good idea, mainly for the people who don't have a long attention span, who aren't going to sit through all of the interviews for all of the candidates. So whether it's 3, whether it's 5, whether it's 6, if they're members of the community that aren't going to sit and go through all of that piece, I think it's nice to be able to have some side by side that you could quickly, whether it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or 5 minutes, that if you spent a few minutes, you could look and see who each of the candidates were.
Did you guys?
Anybody else have an opinion?
Let me ask a question. So these interviews will be taped, obviously, and people can go back and look at them, right?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Steffenthaler?
I do think 5 minutes is a long time if we're going to do it, because an elevator speech usually is, I think, 2 minutes or so. 5 minutes, if you sit and watch a video for 5 minutes, it does appear to be long. I don't know if it's necessary. I'm okay either way, but 5 minutes, I think, is a long time to do it. So.
Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I'd like as much face time as I can see with them, especially if they're going to be, introducing themselves to us. I can deal with 5 minutes. It doesn't bother me in the least. If you all decide you want it to be a shorter period of time, it just makes our one-on-one time that much more valuable. But, I think it's important that we're able to see them and hear what they have to say. If maybe we just say it's up to 5 minutes, because some of these people may not be real talkative and may not have much to say. May take them 2 minutes to say what they want to say.
This is more for the community, though, not necessarily.
I understand that.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's important for the community to be able to hear from them, and if they don't want to speak 5 minutes, great, but, you're talking to thousands of people.
Okay, but if they're gonna get the opportunity before the actual interview to like open up with a summary of themselves, I think that will kind of like serve the purpose. And I don't know about the time limit, but I think 3 minutes is enough for them to give a nice little summary. And I believe if I was interviewing, I would probably prefer giving my opening statement just before the interview, because you kind of flow into it. And with regards to the time we're going to spend with them, we're going to get to know them very well during the questioning. So I think that opening speech is just for them to kind of like give a nice little summary of who they are. And I believe 3 minutes is quite enough, but I don't know if there should be a limit on it or not. I don't think they'll talk for 10 minutes.
I know in other school districts, it's pretty much pretty regimented, like, okay, you have 5 minutes to give your opening statement. Well, they ask a series of questions, you have a certain amount of time to respond to that question, so that it keeps things, kind of moving. Obviously, when we all go in for our one-on-one interviews, that'll be a little more free form, a conversation. But what we do in the public will follow a pretty strict protocol. So it's gives each candidate equal time to share their information. And, as far as the video, the elevator speech video, what I can tell you is that, and I don't know how it will be here, I've watched a couple of the interview processes in other counties. If I'm at my desk and I would turn it on and just listen, but the majority of people are going to be working when we're doing those interviews. So they're probably, we're probably going to make our decisions before people would have an opportunity to go back and listen to our videotaped meeting. So that would be my only thing. I think a 2 to 3 minute introduction from the finalists that allow them to pick the topic, how they want to introduce themselves to the Martin County community, post it up with their picture, and in their bio or however that's posted on our superintendent search webpage, once it gets to that point, and people can click on it and listen. You know, and we don't have to make it mandatory. If they want to do it and they would like to do it, great. If they don't, you know, I'm okay with
May I
that.
ask you a question, Mrs. Powers?
Sure.
I'm just trying to clarify. So you're talking about two different things, the elevator speech and then the 5 minutes when they first come in for an interview, right?
Yeah, those, to me, they're
It's two
two
different
very
things,
different
right.
things.
And so I just want to clarify that when I talked about the 2 minutes, it was more for the elevator speech in that short video.
Yeah.
The other was 5 minutes, I think is okay for the interview piece.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Roberts?
I just think there's an advantage before we get to the actual interviews for us to have, since we've been very transparent and very process-oriented, to have something on the website, once we decide who the finalists are, to be able to post the headshot of the finalist, to be able to have them in a certain amount of time each submit, whether it's a 2 or 3 minute introduction video, whatever they want to do, if they want to, so that if you went to the website and you saw these are the finalists, you could click on each one, and side by side, you could look at this one, this one, this one, and this one, and not have to wait until the actual interview and then have to go, well, now I need to look at the video for the first one, now I need to look at the video for the second one, now I need to, you know. I mean, I just think it has a good flow, but.
Okay, well, I'm clear on that now. It makes sense. Okay, so why don't we do it? What's the big deal? Let's let them have that, whatever, up to 5 minutes. They do their elevator speech and it'll be there. People can click on
I
it.
think
Yeah.
it needs to
That
be
should make
shorter
sense.
than 5 minutes. Myself personally, I think it should be 2 to 3 minutes, because we don't want, you know, to allow them to make their quick introduction and then really get into what we're looking for in our interview process. I just think it would be, you know, nice. You can tell a lot by someone in a video, their communication style, their accomplishments, what they choose to focus on, because that's why I think we shouldn't, you know, we're not going to say what they have to talk about for 2 or 3 minutes. They get to pick what they want to highlight, and highlight for the community, I think.
So what if I said, after you name the finalists, when we congratulate the finalists and say, okay, here's the day we'd like you to come in for an interview and all of that, one of the things we do is we ask for a headshot, so we make sure and have those. And then I will say to them that if they could get to me a 2 to 3 minute introduction, how would they like to introduce themselves to the Martin County community? And then that just leaves it open. They'll send me what they send me. Typically, I try to give candidates at least over a weekend to do something like this, because most of these people have pretty intense jobs right now trying to get school open and whatnot. So I like to give them a weekend, because I don't think it's fair to ask them to, you know, step away from the job that they're currently doing. I think we want to respect the role that they're currently in. And then, so I would make that due maybe by Monday morning, 8 a.m. or something like that. Does that work for everyone?
Excuse me, Andrea, may I suggest something?
Sure.
If we're looking at a week, then their request would go out on, we're going to select the finalist on the 2nd. So the video request would go out on the 3rd, and if it was due back by the 10th, that's also the Labor Day weekend. So I was wondering if it would come back the 10th, then it could still be posted, because the interviews don't start till the next week on the 16th. Then that would be a good timeline there. But my concern would be the Labor Day weekend is involved in that time. But what date would you want to get those back?
You know, I didn't realize it was Labor Day, so I would say probably Tuesday the 8th by 8 a.m. I mean, the idea that they have an extra day on
Okay.
Labor Day weekend to do it, I think is beneficial, but I wouldn't say Thursday. I would make it Tuesday morning, 8 a.m.
Okay, now that means they would have the Labor Day weekend to work on.
Correct.
It would go out on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. But, of course, the semifinalists now will know that this is going to be something that's requested. So
Sure.
I'm sure they'll be thinking about it now. Okay, great. So that would be due back on the 8th then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think once,
The other item that I had, Mrs. Powers, if I could continue.
sure.
Okay. We did have on the agenda today to talk about a contract, a shell contract, and I think working through Mrs. Falls, we have that now scheduled for September 2nd. Mr. George and I have been in touch, and he has copies of the most recent contracts that have been initiated, one from Sarasota. He also then has the Indian River contract, and he's in the process of preparing a shell contract. And as soon as that's completed, he and I will review that, and normally our process is that Mrs. Powers and Mr. George and I would have a conversation about that, and then on September 2nd, and all board members would have a copy of the shell contract, and then Mr. George and I would review it with the board just to get some feedback from the board on what a typical appointed superintendent contract contains. And there wouldn't be any numbers talked about, but it would be a shell contract to talk about what benefits and what protections are in the contract for the school board as you embark on your first appointed superintendent. And then what happens normally is that when the finalist is selected, the school board chairman and Mr. George initiate contract discussions with the candidate, and we're always available to help anywhere we can in that process. But I just wanted to make sure, Mrs. Powers and board members, that everyone is comfortable with with what I just presented.
Ms. Roberts.
So will we be approving the shell on September 2nd?
No, you won't. All you would be doing is giving input to the board.
So,
And then there would not be we would not request an approval process. We would get input from the board on different provisions in the contract that are in typical superintendent contracts. For example, there's the FADS training program. There would be a provision for transition. There could be the discussion on whether or not the board would like to have an annuity for the candidate. Of course, everything would be dependent on who you would select. So we would just go through that. There may be some things, for example, boards might say we would like the superintendent to have the same benefits in terms of vacation and sick leave as all other 12-month personnel. What this does is gives the chairman and the attorney some preliminary feedback from the board as they start that process. And we have found by doing this that the contract work goes a lot smoother.
so will we be seeing the draft of the shell prior to September 2nd so that we would then have a
Yes,
chance to come up with what
Yeah.
things we want to discuss
Yeah.
then?
Yes, absolutely, and that's why we don't have it completed today. We wanted to make sure that Mr. George had time to draft up a shell contract, and that board members had time in advance to look at it so they could provide input. We also will provide you kind of a summary of benefits that are typical in an appointed superintendent. That our organization has compiled that, and of course. We will provide an updated sheet that has the salaries of appointed superintendents. I know the board has identified a range, and certainly whoever the board selects, that will be a negotiable point.
So when will we see this draft?
I'm not sure if Mr. George is there.
He's
today.
here.
Okay, I might ask Mr. George, we might want to get an update from him on how he is coming on the shell contract, and then we're ready to work with Mr. George as soon as he's available to get that shell completed.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Tony George, School Board Attorney. My expectation, if Mrs. Powers has availability on Wednesday, that we will have it finalized between Dr. Vogel, Mrs. Powers, and myself on Thursday. So that would be so that you all have a chance to review it prior to Monday's meeting.
Prior to Wednesday's meeting.
Correct. Sorry.
Right. Thank you.
And this is Andrea. I just want to remind the board members that even if you approve a shell contract, I just want to remind you that once you offer the position to someone, it's still subject to negotiations. So just because you approve something doesn't necessarily mean that will be the final contract. There may be some wrangling there.
Sure, and
That's correct, but
And I wasn't, this is Lee Roberts, I wasn't thinking we would necessarily approve it. I was just trying to figure out when we would have a chance to give input on what we thought, besides what you all do, what the rest of the board thinks.
yes, ma'am. That's why we like this process, because what happens if you don't use a process like we suggest, and I think we're the only organization that does this when we're working with boards, is then it makes it extremely difficult for the school board chairman and the board attorney to negotiate a contract when board members don't have any input in different provisions of it.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be set on that, and it's been a pleasure to work with Mr. George. We've been talking almost every day, and we'll come to a contract that the board can use as a first review.
Perfect, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay. Did you all have anything else? FSBA?
I think this
don't
is
think so.
all I had.
Okay, wonderful.
I'm good, Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate all you're doing.
Thank
Okay.
you. We're signing off. Thank you.
Okay. So now it's time for open to the public. Do we have anything from Diane? No? No open to the public? Seeing none in the room. Open to the board. Ms. Roberts, do you have anything?
No, just reiterating once again that a symptom will not get your class sent home. A symptom is something that will get you sent home. So if there's anybody in the 40 people that are participating in this, if somebody in the class has a symptom, the class is not going home. You have to have contact with a positive person. Thanks.
Or presumed positive?
Presumed positive is the same. It has the
Yeah.
word positive in it, so yeah.
Yeah. I think people are like, they are not hearing that people are testing positive, but they're presumed positive. They've been exposed to someone directly that is positive. So we presume that they are, and that's the quarantine. That's the protocol that the health department has set up. Okay, Ms. Duffenthaler.
I just want to mention that with FEA's lawsuit, I asked Mr. George just to look at it and let us know what that means for, I sent you an email, what that means for school board, just so we have some, information. I don't know that you've had time to look at it, but.
Madam Chair, I read the order earlier today. Before I give any opinions, I want a chance to read it again and look at the decisions you all have made. At this point, schools are up and running, so my immediately gut reactions were in two areas, but let me read it again. And for districts which are already running, I don't know how you change the way you're administering school. If you haven't read the order, a circuit court overruled Commissioner Corcoran's requirement to return to brick and mortar in August. That is a very short, polite summary of that court order, and I would read it again before I have anything further to say.
Well, and he also gave the school board the power to make decisions. I don't know that you've read that
Well,
yet,
the
right?
court
The court did.
court said that the school board always had the power and that the Florida Department of Education and Commissioner did not have that power.
Okay, I knew you didn't have time to read it, but thank you for doing that, appreciate it.
Anything else, Ms. Steffenthaler?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Anderson? Mr. DiTerlisi?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Okay. And I have nothing, so we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.